Thomas.
Hey, man.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm doing quite well, all things considered.
That's fantastic. Thomas, I just realized this is probably the first time we have spoken to each other, maybe in a year. So happy 1 year anniversary.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. How have you been?
Well, literally, I've been on self-isolation.
Really?
Because I got back from Japan.
Yes. So is it just you in the house?
No, luckily, I was able to, so I moved back in with my mom out in the suburbs.
Okay.
Because I was looking for an apartment before I came back from Japan, but then the world sort of ended.
That happened.
So, right, that happened. And so I was like, well, it doesn't make much sense to look for an apartment right now, especially because all of my sources of income are sort of grinding to a screeching halt.
Mm-hmm. Was there any trepidation about going back to the U.S. during this time?
Not really,
Okay.
because it's home.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've got to come home.
Yeah.
And really, it's a global epidemic. It's a pandemic. So it's going to be anywhere I go on the planet.
Yeah, I guess.
But I'm relatively healthy. My family's relatively healthy, or my immediate family is. My mother and my sister, who are in the house with me. So I was like, the chances of me getting it here are actually probably much less than they would have been were I to have stayed in Japan. Because before they closed the theme park I was working at, we were interacting with guests on the daily. Shaking hands, even though my character wore leather gloves. Even though all of that, it was still a lot of face-to-face contact.
Yeah.
All the time, but they closed the park February 28th or something like that.
Wow.
And I left on the 6th of April. So I was out of work that whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I was not working.
And you left during this pandemic, which is even crazier. Was that whole experience going home as crazy as you can imagine?
Not really. It was I don't know how much flying you've done, but if you fly before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m., the airports are usually just dead anyway. The big shops are closed and there's not a lot of people. So as I was traveling home, I left Osaka at 10.
Mm-hmm.
That was when our taxi took us to the airport, and there was just no one there. It was just empty.
Yeah.
They didn't. Security just went a little quicker because I was the only one in line. I still had to take my laptop out of my bag and my iPad out of my bag, and I was like, and they still don't have that down to a science yet.
No.
I need them to. The only thing that was difficult for me was that my flight from Seattle, which was the first port of entry into the United States. So I was supposed to fly from Osaka to Tokyo to Seattle to Chicago. But the flight from Seattle to Chicago got canceled, while I was on my way to the airport in Osaka.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of had to do some waiting while they, all the two different airlines that I was working with talked to each other and figured out how they were going to get me home. Because they canceled the flight, they were obligated to get me a flight home, and they did. I just had to route through Detroit, so it just added another 4 hours to my travel.
Yeah.
But really, honestly, it was probably one of the most painless flying experiences I've ever had.
Good for you.
Yeah, I love flying. I love to travel. I love flying. I'm always a little nervous for takeoff and landing, but I love flying.
That's great. My last time flying, I think, was 2014, and I went to Florida, and I was with my grandparents. This is their last trip forever, and my grandparents fell asleep taking off. And so they slept through the whole, bumpiness, and I'm, panicking. I'm sitting next to them, And there's this like this moment where I looked at my grandfather and he's sleeping, and I'm like, overwhelmed with this feeling of like, oh no, what just happened to Grandpa? And then all of a sudden I see his chest moving up and down. I'm like, okay, good. I panicked just a little bit.
Well, you know what they have to do if someone dies on an airplane, right?
What?
They have to lay them out on the seats so that they don't rigor mortis in a seated position.
What?
Yeah, because the plane can make emergency landings.
Yeah. But
somebody dying and already having died does not count as an emergency because there's nothing else they can do. Like, once a person's dead, they're dead.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So as soon as they're able to, pronounce them dead or figure it out, I don't know if, if there's a doctor on board, or even if, I don't know if there's not, I don't know what they do then, but, flight attendants are trained to then, clear out an aisle or clear out a seat, 3 seats wide or however wide they can, and lay the body out so that the body can, rigor mortis in a flat form. Because once the body, contracts that way, it's almost impossible to get a body flat again.
That's what?
That's wild, isn't it?
I want to be this sounds dark and weird. I want to be on that plane and be in the aisle in front or back and just be like, what do you think happened to them? Just play the nice little guessing game. This is the darkest episode yet. I do apologize. See what happens when I bring you on board.
Hey, look, I just got I got random facts about things.
That's fantastic. So, like you said, you were a actor and performer at Universal in Tokyo for the last year, I believe, correct?
Yeah, I was in Osaka.
Osaka. Okay.
Yeah, the other. Tokyo's like New York. Osaka's like Chicago, is what I like to say.
What? Explain that. What's the difference?
Well, it's much like the difference between New York and Chicago. I've always thought that New York is one, I've never been to New York, but from everything that I've heard about New York is that it's just constant motion, constant go, constant traffic. My mom and her friend went, and my mom was like, I will never complain about Chicago traffic again. Because New York was so much worse. And it's really the same between Tokyo and Osaka. I went to Tokyo for the weekend by myself. I just rented an Airbnb, and then I just explored, Tokyo. I took a double-decker tour bus thing. I went to the big tourist attractions. They've got this giant radio tower, the Shibuya crossing, which is that really famous 5-way intersection. I'm sure you've seen in videos of where it's just everybody's crossing in every direction. There's they have crosswalks, but nobody's looking at them. And then I spent 2 days at Tokyo Disney Sea and Tokyo Disneyland. But it's just there's just more people. It's just a bigger city. There's more people. Chicago has the lake that buffers one end, and then as you go out west, it just sort of peters into the suburbs. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what Osaka does as well, where Osaka sits on a bay, and it's a large shipping area, and cruise ships come in. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why Universal chose to build down there, because it's right on the water. But then so the city is sort of there, and as you go further and further out, you do get into the suburbs or the more pastoral Japan. You can go to Nara, which has a deer park in it. Ooh. And so many people go to this deer park that these deer, one, they will bow to you if you bow at them.
What?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy cool. But they also expect you to feed them because so many people do. So they will come up and nibble at your pockets, thinking you have the cookies that you can buy to feed the deer. But these deer have no fear of people. They'll come up to you and I've seen pictures of people sitting with deer and yeah. So I think that's kind of cool.
That's majestic, I would say.
It really is. But part of me is also or we could just let the deer alone and
that's
leave
true.
the deer alone.
Very true.
I don't know. It's a bit of a balance. I guess I met a lot of people while I was in Japan who were super environmentally conscious, and like I've never been like anti-environmentalism. That's crazy, but like I've never been super in that way. But then it got me thinking, and so I was like, I love the Brookfield Zoo, and I went with my family all the time. We still go all the time, but like, are zoos great? I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Should a tiger be in suburban Chicago? Is that a thing?
In Madagascar, the movie, they can. I'm not sure maybe in real life.
Right. I don't know. It's just like, it's a thing I don't know enough about.
That's interesting. I don't know. Maybe when this is over, we have to start going to more zoos and start paying attention.
Maybe.
Yeah. So, besides the deer and Disney and being home away from home, your experience as a performer in Osaka, how would you describe it?
Well, Universal is like such, it's such a microcosm of an experience, because it is a like Western company in this foreign land, but so it's like there was so much that was like performing back here that was really similar, because it's a theme park, and I've worked for Universal and I've worked for Disney, and of course I do not speak for the companies in the slightest. This is my personal experience, and I'm going to do my best to keep it real, while not like intentionally trying to trash a reputation or anything like that. I just want to speak to my experience. So as a performer, I think because you're contracted and you're brought over there was this weird sense of like stardom that like I've not really experienced in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Because like I'm a working actor, but like I've never worked in Broadway in Chicago. I've never worked at the Goodman. I've never worked at Steppenwolf. I'm not a consistent player in Second City or Laugh Out Loud or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But like, because I was brought over from the U.S. or there were tons of performers from Australia and Great Britain and the UK and Ireland and from all over the world. We had a Bollywood show, so there was a bunch of guys from India, and just because we're brought over, I think to the guests at the park, there was this sense of like superstardom. We have there's a phenomenon at the USJ parks, and I've sort of noticed it now that I've been able to take a look at it for some of my friends who like work at Walt Disney World or Disneyland, called super fans. And these are guests at the park who come to like every show that one particular performer performs at. Mm-hmm. Or like most of them. Like I had a super fan who was there Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday almost every week, sometimes on Saturdays and Sundays. But she would be there for every one of my shows, and I was doing on average like 4 shows a day, sometimes as many as 6 shows a day, and she would be there for every single show.
Wow.
Just taking pictures. And my show is very guest interactive, but it's also like very the same every time. Just because of the script that we had, there wasn't a lot of improvisation in it.
Yeah. Do you speak English during this, or are you translated?
Both. So we learn our script. I want to say about half of the script we learned in Japanese, as well as English. It was that little flavor that made it more special for, I think, the Japanese guests, which were the majority of the guests.
Yeah.
Which was cool. Like I kind of wish that I had learned a bit more Japanese while I was there. Mm-hmm. But again, like I said, our scripts are very sort of firm on what we can and can't say. Mm-hmm. And that's just the show that I was in particularly. And I'm not going to be able to mention the show. It's part of the contract that I signed.
Oh, okay. Fair. That's okay. So I'm curious, when this pandemic happened, would you take it more seriously if you were back home, or not at all?
Oh, I don't know. I guess, I don't know, because the way I saw it was like, it all depends on what I'm doing and where I was going. I think I would probably have taken it a little more seriously were I back home, simply because it was difficult for me to get information in Japan, because like one, I wouldn't be able to watch like the news because it was all in Japanese and I had no idea what was going on. So of course I probably could have, looked up stuff online, or listened to news podcasts or things like that to get my information. But sometimes that's not as succinct as like the 5 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news back here in Chicago, which I think is very succinct. It's very what's the word I'm looking for? Nonpartisan. At least like NBC and ABC and all that stuff. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
So I think I probably would have taken it a little more seriously. But like we knew, at least I knew, that I was coming into contact with guests from all over the world. Most of them were Japanese, but there was a huge amount of guests from China, Taiwan, Thailand, Indonesia, like Laos, all over Asia and in the South Pacific coming into our park. So we did our best. I mean, I was washing my hands all the time. There was hand sanitizer, right outside, right in our backstage area for us to use. So that was about all we could do, because we still, at this time before they closed the park, we still had to provide the show for the guests. You know what I mean? And that's how I felt as a performer. There were some performers who were like, we should be super distancing ourselves from guests, even if we're on stage. Like, there was a platform that we could perform on.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? This is what I'm here to do. This is my job. I'm taking the steps that I can, without like just completely shutting down.
Yeah.
Because I say, if you're going to ask me to perform 20 feet away from everybody the entire show, I think you might as well just shut down the show.
Yeah.
That's how I felt.
For sure. And, as another performer, I always think now to the future of what's the future of performing going to look like? We met during Winter Wonderfest, which is similar to what you've done in Osaka. And I think, are we going to have it? Are we going to be able to still perform with kids? I'm looking down the line another 6 months. Who knows? But it's something to think about.
It is. And I definitely think the world is going to want to go back to the way things were.
Yeah.
Because I think if you just look at I think especially with like the older generations of people who like really are the peoples who make the decisions in the world right now.
Yeah.
They're all about like doing things the way they've done them before. Like, it's really hard to get innovation and progress pushed through any sort of government or any sort of social changes. I'm not saying it's impossible, but like it's really hard to. So I definitely think like the return to normalcy is going to be the governors and governments and in cities' first priorities. Once the health and safety of everybody is confirmed, once there is a cure, or once there is adequate testing, and that's its own like socio-political drama that I don't even know enough about to get into.
Oh, for sure.
But in terms of performing, like I think people crave that already.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
Like I'm a part of 2 Facebook groups that are. One was started out west, I think in Utah, and it's just called the Quarantine Karaoke Party. And like, while I've seen the amount of people posting videos like slowly drop down as we've continued into this these shelter-in-place orders, like the amount of people who weren't performers putting stuff out there because they needed an outlet of expression was huge. And there's one I think that was started in Chicago called the Quarantine Cabaret. Like, and it's just people posting videos and talking about performing, people wanting to like put together Zoom musicals or Zoom play readings. I just did a reading of The Breakfast Club with friends last night. What I forgot was how much I enjoyed the collaborative part of performing. I really didn't get a chance to do that a lot in Osaka. My show was a single person show. So there were like 6 of us who all played the same character, but we were never on stage at the same time because we were the same person, right? And I did host an improv class while I was there.
That's good.
So sometimes I'd do some teaching, sometimes we just jam. But to do do this reading with a bunch of people. You know, some people I knew, some people I'd never met before. But I was like, oh my God, I forgot how much I just enjoy essentially playing pretend with people for 2 hours. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, it was just so nice. So I was like, man, I gotta get back into that. I gotta somehow. So, you know, I'm keeping my distance from everybody. I'm hoping everybody else keeps their distance from everybody else so that we can flatten this curve, so that we can get back out there. Because I know that artists are going to hit the ground running, making things, right? Because so many theaters are like, we're not going to be able to reopen or things like that. Or, you know, there was all that worry, especially when people were first shutting down, that the theaters were never going to be able to reopen. And I go, well, you're going to have the artists, and therefore I think you're going to have the people who want to get out of their house and who want to go see things, who want to see new theater, who want to finally go to an improv show that they say they've always wanted to, who, you know, who want to go to movies, who want to do all these things. So I think there's going to be a demand. Like, I think there's going to be a crazy demand for, like, tour guides, because people are going to want to get out and see their city that they never saw before. You know, or people are going to want to do the things that they never did, and that this quarantine made them go like, oh my goodness, I've never ridden the Ferris wheel at Navy Pier. Yeah. And it's like, what? You got to do it. Yeah, and people are going to go do it.
And you know what? The more you talk about it, the more I think, you know, knock on wood, across your fingers, that we do go back to a somewhat normal in like May or June. This summer will be very interesting. And I think it's going to be very emotional should we do go back to normal. I think, like you said, I haven't done the family outing with my family in maybe about a year because of school and other stuff. So it's going to be fun just to maybe go take a day trip to the city with them and go to museums and the park and the beach. And it's going to be, I think, very emotional for a lot of people when we do go back.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thomas, so I know, like I said before, we met during Navy Pier. You are now, I think, my 6th or 7th guest from Navy Pier to be on this show, which proves either I don't have a lot of friends or you guys are very easy to say yes to, or you guys say yes and a lot. So maybe that's why.
I think we do. Here's the other thing. I think it's just that we have a really either close knit and just like good group of people. Mm-hmm. Like I have been waiting to go back to Navy Pier to work with that group of people again. Yeah. You know, I think so many people even in like the corporate world, like, you know, even if you found your dream job, you know, you got your business degree or whatever, and you're vice president in charge of marketing or whatever, if your team isn't good, and I mean that in like multiple senses of the word, you're not going to enjoy yourself. And the team we had at Navy Pier in 2018, 2019, I have been just aching and itching to go back to.
And you guys welcomed me with open arms as someone who's never done that kind of performing before. And
it was my first year at Navy Pier too, man.
Really?
Yeah, I knew like 3 people or 4 people in the group because of working with them on other projects, but I'd never worked at Navy Pier before or done Winter Wonderfest before. Yeah. I'd done improv before, but not this specific thing.
Yeah. I've never been at Navy Pier in that, or I think I only knew one person, and that was it. And yeah, they welcomed everyone with open arms, and that was probably the most fun I've had. Even the second year, you know, I can't wait to go back and see all those fine folks again. So Thomas, I know that you listen to my other podcasts all the time. This is where you get to hand me, Thomas.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Well, of course, man.
So you know we do a game at the end, and it's called Time for Two. And I give you 2 minutes on the clock, and you have to answer as many icebreaker questions as you can.
Oh, snap, I'm ready. I've been listening to Wait, Don't Tell Me my entire life, so I'm ready for these, like, podcast radio games. I'm so excited.
All right, here we go. And 3, 2, 1, go. Do you still have a MySpace page?
I never had. Oh no, I don't, and I only had one like right before it died.
What's your typical? Go ahead.
I like really never used it. A bunch of my friends did. My parents were not big into me having like social media because they didn't understand it. So I like barely had a MySpace page.
Nice. What's your typical bedtime?
My typical bedtime, not on quarantine, is like anywhere between 1 and 2 a.m.
Okay.
On quarantine, that shifted to like 12:30 p.m.
Oh, nice.
Or a.m., sorry.
Yeah. Are you good at cooking?
I'm good at cooking for me. I'm not good at cooking for other people.
So the microwave's what you're saying.
No. Like, I'll saute some stuff, I'll put some spices in, and like, I like to eat it, but I think it's like a weird combination of things for other people to eat. I would never willingly serve it to you unless you asked me to cook for you. Then on your own head be it.
Okay. Left Twix or right Twix?
Neither. I'm allergic to dairy.
Oh, okay. Netflix or Hulu?
Hulu.
Are you afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Yes.
Emoji of choice?
The sunglasses.
Who's bringing sexy back?
The guy from Yu-Gi-Oh! Who invented Dungeon Dice Monsters.
Okay. Earth, Wind, or Fire?
Captain Planet.
Okay. 20 seconds. Pokemon or Digimon?
Digimon for sure.
What's your powder house?
Gryffindor.
What's your favorite smell?
Campfire.
Buzz or Woody?
Buzz.
Do we all live in a yellow submarine?
Yes, and I've written a song about an octopus.
Fork, spoon, or knife?
Spork.
Sword or shield?
Sword.
Ding! Ba-ba-bang, ba-bang. Look at that. We had that time for two, as we say. That was a bad pun. Thomas, I can't think of another person I want to talk to right now during a pandemic. So thank you for saying yes and for coming on here. I really do appreciate it. It was a lot of fun to just catch up with you. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, and thank you for reaching out to people. I think it's really special when people do that. We all talk about it. We have the ability to. Everybody's got a phone. Everybody's got a computer. And I think this time in American history, because that's really what this is like, it's a time in American history. People are going to talk about this time period for decades.
Yeah.
It's really important for people to reach out and just say hi, even for a hot second.
Yeah. It's been just fun just to get people's opinions and stories.
All right, man. So thank you.
Yeah. You take care, buddy.
See ya.
Bye-bye. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for listening to this episode of You Have a Minute, a daily isolated podcast. My thanks to Thomas Squires. Like I said, Thomas and I have not spoken to each other in a year. We didn't have any bad blood or anything. It's a little hard to reach out to someone who is not in Chicago at the moment. So it's always fun to catch up with him. A very nice guy, a very funny guy. We worked a lot during Winter Wonderfest and a couple years ago, and we made just the silliest stuff up, and it was fun to work with him. As always, Teacher Week is coming up April 26th to May 2nd. I will announce the guest hopefully by the end of this week, maybe Thursday or Friday, once I have a distinct lineup. I'm still working on that at the moment. Wash your hands, stay isolated, wear a mask, let's flatten this curve, and I will talk to you later.